Morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our Built for Media webinar. I'm Jason Friedlander, Senior Director of Product Marketing for Verizon Digital Media Services. And in the next hour or so, we'll be talking about the trends in video consumption, and we'll walk you through what Verizon Digital Media Services is doing to help you provide the best video and media experiences for your users. I'm joined today by Kyle Okamoto and David Brown. So Kyle, if you can introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jason. Kyle Okamoto. I run our technology operations and network for Verizon Digital Media Services.
Dave.
Hi, I'm David Brown. I'm a principal product manager. I'm in charge of our CDN platforms and the services that run on top of them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation today. We're going to talk about, how you build a network specifically for media, which is exciting. There's a lot of large networks, smaller networks geared towards security or DevOps, but we really wanted to talk about, what we think makes our network special, especially as it's around media. So in the next few slides, I want to let you know that these slides and the webinar, our recording, will be provided soon after this ends. Also, please feel free to submit questions via the webinar tools, and we'll answer them towards the end of the webinar. I thought I would level set and provide some context here for the entire webinar. The internet usage continues to grow and has not yet reached saturation, with only 52% of the world's population accessing the internet regularly. In fact, since 2013, the internet has added more than 1 billion new users. Much of those new users are joining from Asia, and most of those new users are mobile only, if not mobile first. In North America alone, we've added almost 20 million users in the same time frame. Most markets are expected to consume at least 3x more data than they did in 2014, and much of that consumption is around video. As you can see here, over-the-top video, or OTT as it's often called, is growing at a far faster rate than any other type of use case. Video is driving the growth of the internet, and this presents both an opportunity and a problem. Does your delivery partner have available capacity reliably to deliver your video at the fastest speeds and highest quality you require? Just in the last 2 years, demand for OTT video has grown by more than 66%. APAC and North America are at the tip of the spear when it comes to OTT video consumption. Combined, we make up almost 70% of OTT video consumption, and much of that growth is to mobile devices. Although all other geographies are not in focus here, all geographies are demonstrating significant growth in OTT demand, and a lot of the other geographies are in mobile-first areas, so it's super important that a network can deliver reliably to those devices. According to Nielsen, 89% of OTT viewing still takes place on the television. This is typically done by the way of Roku, Apple TV, etc. In fact, 45% of the growth in OTT is by the way of these connected devices. When you think about it, although the delivery mechanism for video is moving towards IP, the consumption of video largely remains the same. This would indicate that consumers are looking for flexibility in their consumption, but don't want to consume video on their 5-inch mobile phone. This explains the sustained growth in TVs. So let's tie it all together. Given the continuous growth in internet users and the increased demand in OTT video, it comes as no surprise that companies are relying more and more on content delivery networks, or CDNs. According to Cisco, reliance on CDNs continues to grow by 44% year over year. Verizon Digital Media Services provides a leading content delivery network called Edgecast. I'll now hand it over to Kyle. He'll explain a little bit about what we're doing specifically to deliver the best OTT video experiences through our network.
Thanks, Jason. We're absolutely seeing that growth right now. We've seen it for the last few years. We've doubled our network, 2016, 2017, and we're going to double it again this year. It gets harder and harder to keep doubling, but that's the pace that we're on right now. You see our map. We definitely align to the major markets, sending a lot of the bandwidth, but we've done a great effort penetrating South America, India, and Asia Pacific Rim to capture that growth. And we're absolutely seeing that mobile first in places like India and South America and Africa, where the majority of the content is consumed on mobile devices. Lots of smaller bandwidth transactions, high transaction rates, and the growth there is unbelievable. I think that we've poured a lot of investment into the network to build up capacity. My chief architect yesterday told me capacity constraints lead to customer complaints, and I thought that was a good alliteration of why we do what we do. But on top of that capacity, David is going to talk a lot about the software that sits on top of that, and they really go hand in glove there.
Capacity is important when it comes to a network, especially when you're doing media, video. What does like 48 terabits per second? What does that equate to?
Yeah, that's good. It's not tablespoons. It's basically, if you think about high def, around 1.5 to 2 megabits per second. That's 30 some odd million people watching a high definition stream at the same time. Now that's not happening, obviously, but we need to leave a lot of headroom for our customers. If you think about standard def, that could be 50 some odd, 55 million people all watching video at the same time. And unfortunately, for me, since I have to run the network, our customers don't really coordinate their live events and their software downloads and their patches and their upgrades and their streaming video at the same time. So we can see 20, 30, 40, 100 live events all happening at the same time, and you can see these massive spikes in the network, both regionally and globally.
It's the opposite. They want to counter program against each other.
Yes,
viewers,
exactly,
right?
exactly. So the NBA Finals is coming up for all the basketball fans. We'll still see lots of other big providers say, you know what, I don't care about users all watching that final. I'm going to go out with my programming on that same time, and we have to manage that.
Yeah, so I often get, when sitting on panels doing other things, people will ask, is the internet or our networks ready for the Super Bowl, right? The broadcast audience is coming over to an IP delivered stream.
And yeah. So Asia and the US, you said before, over 70% of the content consumed there. So those are the markets where we see the really large, high-scale events. And they perform well, but they're nowhere near the traditional broadcast television. But the growth rates are staggering. To see how many people watch the same live event for the last 3 or 4 years online, and looking back just 3 years, maybe even 2 years, the growth is multiples there.
Yeah, and it's not like our CDN or any other one is stopping expansion, right, and freezing at the egress we have now, and we already allow headroom in each pop anyway for spiked events, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we try to run the network as lowly utilized as possible, while making sense for our customers' price points, of course. And a customer may be very steady and fluid throughout the day, and then obviously peak during the the evening hours when whatever time zone those consumers happen to be in. But that can happen off peak. It can happen in the middle of the day, and then a customer might go up 4x, 10x, 40x, 100x of what they normally stream when a natural disaster happens, when a breaking news, Trump drives a lot of traffic on major social media platforms. Sporting events are huge, concerts are huge, award shows, major software events, Cyber Monday, Christmas Day, everybody gets those games that they want to go download and play right away. So all of those things can happen, and we have to account for that on the network.
I have one more question about building out a global network. But Dave, on the software side, what's unique when we're putting pops in all these locations to make sure that we're targeting the users appropriately to make sure they're getting the highest quality at every given time?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot on the software side to handle those things, and a lot of the challenges that he addressed with scalability and reliability go hand in hand with the software side of things.
But not doing things like DNS triangulation.
Right, yeah, we use BGP Anycast to do routing to our POPs, so you get a much faster connection to our servers. You don't have to do that triangulation, as you mentioned, to get to our POPs.
And that obviously probably directly correlates to higher quality video chunks being delivered to the end users quicker.
That's right. Yeah, and we have the ability to spread files out within the POP locally, so that if there are huge spikes, we can handle those and still continue to serve those big files, the 2 megabit per second streams reliably.
Cool. So before we move on, like I always think it's interesting, people say, oh, we have a global network, and they have a POP in London maybe and something in Australia, but we literally are global. You can see by all our pretty little dots. But what does it take, like physically, to build out a global network?
Yes, it's not easy, and it's not glamorous to deal with import-export compliance and legal and regulatory issues and licensing and operating licenses in various countries. We spend a lot of time on logistics and supply chain, and being a very efficient tech ops organization. Figuring that out, but mostly it's due to working with partners. Ever since Edgecast was day one, it was built in the partnership model framework. It was built for wholesalers and resellers, and for our managed content delivery network partners that take our gear and embed it in their last mile footprints. So that's been a very successful program for us to partner with the local incumbent, ISPs or MVPDs or whatever other acronym we want to call them, the landline eyeball owners or the mobile eyeball owners there. So we do that all around the world. It's very beneficial for us because we get great relationships, the best quality possible because we're as close to the eyeballs as possible. And proximity is a very important point. And it's good for them because we take all of that traffic off of their international backbones. We don't just dump traffic into Latin America from Miami. We bring it down there, we localize it. That saves them a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it gives them a better consumer performance. So it's really a good win-win for us that's helped us enable this global.
That's probably why our software layer is so important, and that is because once you get equipment into an area or region, it's not easy to just upgrade it. You have to have the right equipment that's going to scale over the course of, what do we refresh, every 2 years or so?
We're actually seeing our refreshes become a lot faster these days as we have a more rapid change, both in the hardware and the software. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you think about Argentina or something like that, where we have multiple POPs, you have to have a balance of trade, right? Whatever you import, you have to export. All the gear has to be new and wrapped in plastic, and you can't, send a part or something that's not. So you have to deal with all those challenges on a proactive basis to be ready for your customers.
So what kind of methods do we use on the software side to make sure that we're constantly staying up to date and across the globe, where we might have equipment that's just all similar, but might be 1 or 2 versions ahead of it?
Yeah. So yeah, we do run our POPs. Some of the older POPs have older generations of the servers versus the new ones that we're building out that have the latest and greatest technology. And so for us, a lot of that has to do with just the way that we build the software using agile development methods, making sure that we can bring our specs up to date and utilize the latest server technology. So we have teams that are specifically dedicated to just doing performance testing, so we can get the best output out of the server itself with as minimal code change as possible on our side.
And looking to optimize every millisecond.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, cool. Let's move on. Perfect. Let's talk about that next generation network architecture, Kyle. Things we've done over the past to keep up with the pace and the demand.
Sure. So when you double a network every year, it starts off easy. You're like, okay, I went from 2 to 4, 2 to 5 terabits, and as you keep doing that, it gets harder and harder. So our next generation network rollout started with the premise of moving from 10 gigabit to 100 gigabit connections, giving us a 10x boost in capacity, lowering our OpEx costs and supporting the ecosystem partners that wanted to go that way as well. And then it morphed and it evolved and it grew organically within the organization to a highly redundant and reliable model. So we implemented a border core model, which means we have the border routers that connect to the peers and the transit providers and the internet exchanges. And then we have core routers behind them in the spine leaf architecture. Those core routers connect to our servers, to our storage, to our application delivery, to our e-commerce platforms. And it allows us to have an N+1 redundancy. We already had all the application layer redundancy in the software stack. We already had it in data centers. And we already had it in the individual components within the POP. So adding it to the network basically meant, the entire platform that has that N+1 redundancy. It allows us to do maintenances, emergency outages, software updates, A/B testing, canary testing on the network as we treat that infrastructure more as code every day. And we actually were able to simplify the network, which is counterintuitive when you think about scaling up. Usually networks get more complex. We're actually able to remove some elements from the network, eliminating some of those single points of failure and ultimately increasing the reliability.
And it's important today, I think people understand that are watching the webinar, Edgecast really isn't a single network. So we've got to do this on all 4 networks that we maintain throughout the globe.
Yeah, so we have optimizations for different types, right? So delivering video, which as you mentioned is a predominant amount of the traffic, is very different than delivering an e-commerce platform that is low bandwidth, high transaction intensive, right? So video may be the largest bulk in terms of size because a video file is much larger than a website or your banking application on your phone, but it may not be the most intensive in terms of transactions per second or requests or potentials for DDoS attacks and things like that. So we basically have optimizations across different slices of the network e-commerce, application delivery, small file delivery, large file delivery, our route services, our security services. They're all basically layers and slices that we give different prioritization to, different configurations to, different software sets to, but it all sits on top of a very, very common set of infrastructure.
And does that go to your point 3 on reliability? It eliminates that single point of failure right there?
Yeah, and it allows us to do a maintenance, for example, right? Or test something out and not break anything, right? As major markets, think Chicago or London or Singapore or something like that, as these major markets grow, the availability that you have to provide to your customers, it becomes much, much more important for that high def stream. You can't squeeze the hose and have a customer be okay with a degraded state. So we want 0 degraded states on all network activities.
Okay. And when it comes to availability, obviously, how do you think about building out the network like the map we saw before? How do you think about your next step or 5 steps ahead when it comes to availability, especially when delivering broadcast type quality video online? It's got to be up 100% of the time. We know that, but it's got to reach the markets it needs to reach.
Right. Yeah. And the markets point is probably the most relevant. When you think about the US or, a very developed country versus somewhere in Africa or Latin America or the Middle East, you have to have a completely different approach in both how you design the gear, how it uses power, how it uses, compute, what kind of storage footprint it has, and the type of software that's running on top of that. We run a PCI compliant network to take credit card transactions for e-commerce customers. That may not always be an option in some of these more remote locations that don't have that, robustified, data center footprint with all the certifications and things that we need. So, that causes a major re-architecture of the platform. Rather than this cookie cutter templatized architecture, we actually have to have multiple layers for the mega large pops, for the super pops, for the the mini pops and the micro pops, working all the way up and down the spectrum, all differently tuned for that same media experience. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter where they are. They want to watch high def. They want to stream their games with their friends in the neighborhood. They want to download all the latest software, and they want to talk and text and do all the other fun things that they need to do.
Yeah, I think that's I often get asked this question a lot, and I'd like to hear you guys' answers. Why did Verizon even get in this game? And I think, you kind of just answered it, but Dave, if you want to talk about, why do you think they went with Edgecast? Why do you think they're in the CDN game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've sort of cornered the mobile market or have a big share in there. They do pretty well with landline, wireline businesses. They weren't lacking a bit in the media space, right? That's sort of the next frontier.
It's the next network.
It's the next network, yeah, exactly. So, we have or had at the time a large network. Now we have a huge network, and so they saw us as the means to get to that next network to be able to provide that media experience that customers are looking for.
And we shared a lot of the same ideals, right? If you think about Verizon's wireless network, I'll be careful in my words here, working for them, but they're not the cheapest, but they're the best, right? Mm-hmm. They care about quality and performance, and that's really been in our DNA from day one, right? You buy a company for the people and the culture, and that was really ingrained, that performance first culture. And this network architecture was, the brainchild of our very first hire at Edgecast years ago. That sets the vision and the overall mission for the architecture, and it has a performance first mentality. It's not the cheapest solution we could have done. It wasn't the fastest solution, but we felt it was the best solution. And that's very similar to how Verizon operates. We've also been able to leverage the Verizon relationships internationally with those partners, right? So it's been a very good thing to see that partnership expand just because of the fact that we are leveraging the Verizon relationship.
Yeah, and as far as broadcast is concerned, it's still cheaper than throwing satellites into space.
This is very true.
So it's
very
cheaper
true.
on that front.
Very true.
All right, let's take it on to the next thing. So I think one of the interesting things we do as a network, obviously machine learning, AI is the biggest buzzword besides blockchain. So, how are we applying some of those things to our network? I know we've been doing it for a long time. We're starting to do it more, but, what are some of the things we're doing?
So this is a really good partnership between I'll say the traditional software dev environment and the traditional network environment. And we've really blurred those lines. So our network is a piece of code at the end of the day, right? It is infrastructure as code. And that's kind of the model that we've been following for a while now. But this is also about ingesting a massive amount of data, right? We get structured and unstructured data from various sources, from our customers that have different video players and different quality of experience monitoring tools, from our own monitoring tools, our homegrown tools, from open source tools, right? We take all this data in about the network and about the customer experience, and we have to act on that. So we do a massive amount of analysis on hundreds of different dimensions on the network. We call them grids, and expose that to our monitoring teams and our operations teams. But ultimately, we act on those in a proactive way, right? So we try to be proactive, predictive, and progressive, constantly getting better, constantly figuring out what the right thing to do is before we need to, right? Before it degrades service. That's ultimately the end goal. So we generate all these changes in an automated system that we've built, a traffic management system that we've built. And those changes are recommended or automatically implemented based upon the risk levels. And by implemented, I mean we might do some A/B testing, we might do some canary testing, we might do one customer testing, working it out in a beta mode or whatever. And then we're running all that testing upon those changes to measure what we did. And that generates more data that then goes back into that perpetual cycle. And the reason why we do this is there's a lot of unpredictability on the network, right? When you're reaching thousands of networks, over 4,000 networks, a lot can happen, right? We have no control over all those downstream wireless and wired networks, right? There's 5 to 10 fiber cuts in India a day, in some of these markets that we're operating in. So we have to be able to, predict what's going to happen and proactively adapt the network using various software tools to ultimately make sure that our customers can always have the needed capacity and quality.
Yeah, not even like our peering relationships and stuff like that, but even what our own customers are doing, like you hinted at earlier. We never know when the next massive game download is coming, right, or a tweet is going to blow up a region, or right, or the live event's going to spike in usership.
Yeah. I mean, we did over 42,000 live events last year alone. And there's only 365 days in the year. Right. So some days are more popular than others. Sometimes we get heads up from our customers, but sometimes the customer is experimenting, and which we love, right? We love them to try out new over-the-top business models, new media models, new monetization models that we enable with our Uplink platform. And they may think, oh, the event's going to have 40,000 people, and it ends up having hundreds of thousands, right? Which is amazing. The network has to be ready for something like that.
Yeah, and we've gotten ready. Originally a peer of David and I when we were lowly SEs. Colin, he took on the role of traffic management in our org, and that about 2 years ago, I think. And it was one guy, and now it's literally using machine learning to do nearly 80 or 90% of the job he was doing by hand just 2 years ago, right?
Yeah, that team has grown a lot, and worked closely with Dave and the engineering team to implement a lot of customizations and new tools and techniques in the platform, and it's paid dividends for sure.
Yeah, and I think things like that are beyond important, especially when you're talking about media, live events, all the things we've been talking about, because you hear competition in the space or other CDNs talk about the number of servers they have, but all of that is relative, right? It's really about the intelligence of the software running on those servers and how you manage it and how you roll it out and keep everything up to date and fresh, right, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's the number of servers is sort of an irrelevant number when what matters more is the capacity that you have within that, the peering connections you have, and as you mentioned, the software running on top of all of that.
And I think that's why we're always proud to talk about our capacity number. I don't hear it a lot from a lot of other networks out there, what their total egress is or what they're doing, but I think we're proud of, I think we grew from 2.4 when EdgeCast was acquired just 4 years ago to, 50 plus.
50, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
I'm sure it's been. Unfortunately, you're not gray yet, Kyle,
yes,
so
exactly.
We could have used that as an analogy.
Exactly.
All right, Dave, so why don't, we've talked a lot about the network architecture, the machines, the hardware. Let's get into a little bit about the software that's built on top of that stack, some of the cool things we have coming out that we're rolling out in the CDN.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipe. We'll touch on some of those here, but really specifically related to media, there's a couple of different models that we can approach as far as getting content out to the customers. One is where you're actually pushing content to us, and then we're distributing that out. The other is more of a pull model, which is, I guess, what you would traditionally think of in terms of CDN, being the CDN pulling content from your origin and serving it out. And then we recently rolled out Quick, which is a new protocol that Google originally started. Now it's going through the IETF process. We'll talk about that and how excited we are about that. And then just some of the other optimizations that we have, like mobile device detection and image optimization. So
cool.
Let's go into it.
All right, let's talk about media acceleration.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different streaming solutions for customers, and this is outside of Uplink, which is another video offering that we have. These two offerings allow you to push content to the CDN for either live events or for VOD assets. And so the nice thing about this is your infrastructure that you have to own and maintain is very small. Usually it's just an encoder that you're using and pushing content to us. And we'll accept feeds over RTMP as well as HTTP-based streaming protocols like HLS or Dash. Once those are ingested, that ingest node, which is usually the geographically closest node to where you are, becomes the origin for all of our other infrastructure in the network. So all the other edge nodes will pull from that ingest node, and then you can play it back over your whatever device you're connecting to us over.
Great. And what type of encoders do we support? I'm sure it's pretty much anything.
Yeah, it's pretty much anything. We're pretty agnostic, whether it's Elemental, Harmonics, Cisco's, and Vivio. You can even use really low-end ones like Flash's live media encoder.
Okay, great. So pretty much if you've got an encoder, we can support what you're doing on our CDN. Yep. Okay, let's talk about the next thing, because I think this is actually really interesting, the advanced caching techniques that we've been doing for a while. I know this was one of the first things we kind of did when Uplink and Edgecast came together in the beginning of 2014. So why don't you explain what that is and how it works?
Sure. Yeah. So when you have live events, what ends up happening a lot of times is you'll have a huge rush of requests coming in, and that content hasn't been cached yet at the edge. And so a lot of those requests will end up going to the origin infrastructure to pull that content. What we found is that obviously is not ideal for customers. They don't want to run huge infrastructure to maintain those streams. So what we ended up devising was a way to collapse all those connections and pool them. So all the requests come in, they sort of sit in a waiting room, so to speak, and then we make a request for the content to the origin. We pull that back. One request going to the origin, pull it back, and then we can play that back for all the thousands of customers that are waiting for that request at that time.
I think what's really cool about that is, especially in live events, it increases the quality delivered to the end user, right? Because it's not that specific end user's device that's requesting chunks 1 through 6 and then has to wait to then request 7, 8, 9. CDN's already pulling those down. So in theory, globally, those higher resolution, larger video files should already be at the edge waiting for each user.
Yeah, and we've also implemented, for a long time now, Origin Shield for our customers to protect the customer's origin and improve the caching. I think we've always had a massively high cache hit ratio, ridiculously high for some customers. And getting the content closer and having a cache is a key part of performance.
Yeah, and I think what's important here is, I know we're not talking about Uplink today, but like things like this are available out of the box with Uplink. But what's interesting there, by us being a company that manages both a broadcast quality video solution as well as the CDN, things that we're experimenting on and doing in our own solution are available to our customers using other CDN services like media acceleration.
That's exactly right. Yeah, all of this is available through Uplink and then just to our direct customers as well.
Yeah, it allows us to experiment, get things right, and roll them out, across the entire globe, which is cool. So, so let's say there are 100,000 users, right? Like, so I want people to really grasp this, right? So there's 100,000 users coming in from Los Angeles. Oops, sorry, went too far. In this diagram, how many requests, again, let's just make it clear, would go to the origin server no matter how many people are watching from a specific area?
In an ideal case, it would be one request per bitrate version of the video that you're streaming. So really reduces the load to your origin. Then, as Kyle mentioned, if you do use an origin shield, that gets reduced even more to just basically one request.
Great.
In total. Yeah.
Sounds perfect to me.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was running
it works quite well, yes.
All right, cool. So let's, quick, it's exciting. You mentioned Google's pioneering this, and it's something we've been working on for, I think, 2 years. You kind of first told us about it 2 years ago, and we finally got it out, right?
Yep. Yeah. As of last week, it's finally done, and we're
globally.
Globally.
Okay, great.
Very excited to announce that we can support this for any of our customers now. And what QUIC is, it stands for Quick UDP Internet Connections. The key there is UDP. It's meant to address some of the problems with HTTP2, in particular, which we'll talk about, which is head-of-line blocking, where in times of packet loss, there's some issues with serving traffic and it slows down, particularly on mobile networks. So QUIC is meant to address a lot of those issues related to HTTP2 and TCP.
And again, just goes back to network architecture and software that we were talking before. We were able to roll this out across our entire network. It's not in a single location, a single POP, because of we're running the same software across the board globally, right?
Right.
Yeah, and we did it very safely and deliberately and in terms of our change management rollout processes to make sure that we didn't impact any customers.
Cool. All right, so you want to talk about some of the benefits?
Yeah, so some of the benefits that we've seen. So because this is a fairly new technology, there's not a lot of instrumentation available for us to just leverage to do some testing. So we're still in the process of building that out. So these are just numbers that we've seen from Google, who have been using QUIC for quite some time since it was originally their protocol. They see about 7% of traffic right now running over QUIC, as well as, when it comes to playing video content, there's about 30% less rebuffering. And then pages tend to load a lot faster over mobile networks. And we'll talk about why that is here in just a second.
How about right here?
All right, yeah. So the problem with traditional delivery over HTTP is that it's over TCP. TCP is a great protocol because it ensures that your content's going to get there in the order that you requested it. And this is a typical flow if you're using HTTP2, where everything's sort of spread out under multiple streams, but everything goes over a single connection, and that one connection becomes the only pipe that you have back to the server between the browser. So what happens, if you go to the next slide, is when you have packet loss, which is very common over mobile networks, they're very high congested, lossy networks, your stream stops and you get nothing coming through until that packet gets resent and reordered. And then at that point, your stream, if you're watching a video, will continue. So QUIC is meant to address this problem of everything being non-multiplex, single-threaded through a TCP connection. So what ends up happening when you do have packet losses, there's this sort of duplicate effect where your TCP connections ramped up, you got a nice fat pipe, you're pushing a lot of data through. When packet loss happens, that just drops down, and now your pipe kind of shrinks back again. And this is all part of TCP. It's meant to work this way. It's not a bug in TCP, but it's sort of you get sort of a duplicate negative effect. Like you stop the stream and then your pipe shrinks as well.
Yeah, and like people have taken advantage of TCP to deliver video, but it wasn't necessarily built for video.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so now we're getting at the point with like QUIC and other protocols.
Exactly, these are protocols that are specifically designed for media. And so QUIC itself uses UDP, as we talked about. It's a multiplexed protocol. So you've got, if you're using HTTP2, which is a pretty common standard now for HTTP traffic, those are divided up into streams. Those streams continue through the transport layer over UDP. And so if you go to the next slide, when you actually have packet loss, you're just impacting that one stream instead of the entire connection itself. So data continues to flow out. And so if you've ever been on a mobile network and the page just sort of hangs, that's packet loss most likely. With QUIC, you're going to see the page continue to load, even though maybe one of the assets.
You can even switch networks with QUIC, right?
Yep.
And keep it streaming.
Yeah, we talk about that in a little bit, but it's okay. We can skip ahead of that if you want. But yeah, QUIC, because UDP is connectionless, they had to use this concept called connection ID, which is a way that you can decouple yourself from using the traditional source and IP hash that normally happens. And instead, you can use a connection ID. So if you are going, here we go. If you're listening to Spotify in your house and you walk out to your car and you go off your Wi-Fi network, you go on to LTE, that connection continues, that data continues to flow seamlessly. There's no loss in any of your streaming or even data transferred. So,
yeah, and that's super important for broadcast television, because most users at home and users don't realize, even in their home, when they might have dropped off their Wi-Fi and picked up their LTE on their iPad and are going back and forth, and they blame it on their Wi-Fi network or their wireless network, when it really is a combination of a bunch of technologies behind the scene. But this will enable that, hopefully, those complaints to go away.
Yep.
I can only imagine being a support operator getting those phone calls. It must be impossible to figure out.
It's even worse in markets where the infrastructure is not as good, right? Because there is a lot of switching, both across connection type as well as from different network providers. So you're constantly bouncing around.
Yeah, cool. All right, Dave, you want to talk about some other benefits?
Yeah, sure. So, just in addition to all of the things that we do for media, we are just a full service CDN. And so we support things, as Kyle mentioned earlier about just dynamic content acceleration. And so because of that, we have to, do all of this automation to make things easier, better, faster for our users. So we just have this mantra internally, let's just automate all of the things. And so we try to, as we build those out internally, we try to expose those as much as we can to our customers. Security obviously is going to be another important component of our delivery service. We have a fully fledged web application firewall. We have rate limiting. We have DDoS protection. And then
I don't think a lot of people, can you talk about maybe like what are the benefits specifically for media, like with DDoS protection, like, and the scale of our network? I know we talked about this on our last webinar, right? Like just the overall size of our network helps reduce a lot of that or protect against DDoS attacks. But why is that important in media, you think?
So from a network perspective, DDoS is an inbound attack. Versus most of our traffic is outbound from us to consumers' eyeballs. So we're able to leverage that massive amount of inbound capacity we have to help mitigate that and to spread it out and to get a quick resolution on the potential signature and pattern there. We have such a high caching efficiency that we don't grab customers' content from the origin a lot, right? Less than 5%. And that leaves a massive amount of that inbound capacity to be idle. And we've actually partnered with Verizon, who does a great job on the enterprise solution side, and is a massive DDoS provider as well, and done some cool things with using our massive ingest network to front end a lot of their DDoS attacks as well. Okay. So it's been very beneficial. Again, a synergy there. And the software stack, I think we just did a demo the other day where we simulated attack and what we would do in real time to identify those signatures and respond and adapt accordingly. 24/7, 365 happens all the time. And every time it seems to happen, it always seems to be a new record, which shows that the attacks are getting bigger and more important to address. But
well, you said something I think is important again for the people listening is, we're reducing the calls back to the origin, protecting their origin by, basically sucking in any DDoS attack. But we're also protecting our origin. So if you're using media acceleration or you're using uplink, all those same things, again, are benefits of the network that no matter who you're using, it's
one of the just inherent benefits of a CDN is just that ability to let the CDN absorb those attacks for you.
Right. I think we talked about the next point a little bit earlier, but if you just want to harp again on the immediate feedback using that machine learning to have our network kind of, move traffic around and respond to events or.
Yeah, it's been very beneficial to see the measured results from our customers, right? I think that's the best feedback we like to get on how these changes are impacting them in terms of improving their buffering or reducing their video failures or reducing that time to first byte or click to flick. So those are the ultimate measures, right? Our synthetic measuring and RUM measurements and things like that are meaningless compared to what a customer comes back with their feedback on their application. It's paid dividends as we've scaled up and had individual customers pushing double-digit terabits, without impacting other customers, is a testament to those automated traffic management tools. On top of that new architecture, we've invested a massive amount of money, behind this platform to make it so.
Cool. And I think all of that, all the network stuff is fronted by the humans, the people we have sitting.
The best part of the network.
Coding the software, but our support teams, I think, especially at VDMS, the support team is really treated in high regard, and the amount of time that they kind of put in from learning the craft to working their way through tier one all the way up, all the way back out is important.
Our NOC is a great contributor of talent to the overall organization. To your point, we definitely poach from those teams way too often, and our live ops team is second to none. I mean, 42,000 live events last year. They can scale up for hundreds and hundreds of live events in a day. They have a massive facility to do so, and their capabilities grow every day.
Yeah, and the cool thing about that team is they're on demand. So if anybody listening needs help with live events, they're easy to get up and running. 200 and I think their max is 275 in one day so far, and I think they've done 15,000 events in the first quarter. So yeah, we're really helping content owners kind of monetize things they weren't traditionally able to monetize, which I think is really cool. But one of the cool things about our support, I've always used as a selling point, again, back when we were kind of on the sales team, was we don't see that as a revenue generating division within VDMS. We don't charge you for our mistakes, right? Our support team is really there as an extension of our customers' teams to help solve a problem, whether it's our own or with a partner we may be using or they may be using, to help find the solution and get it solved.
Yeah.
No matter how big or small you are, you can always call and you know, you're a person and they'll help you.
Yeah, they'll help you, and they have heard of the problem before. They are the person most likely solving the problem.
Yep.
One of my favorite stories I've always heard from a customer once told me that they had a support contract they were paying 6 figures for with a competitor, and they had some issue and it was relatively small, so they decided to call the regular support line, and the guy answered the phone and couldn't help him, so he said, all right, I'll call the gold support line. Dials the phone, and the same guy picks up the phone, right? So it's like, that is, we don't want to have that reputation. So I think our support team always continues to amaze me overall. I think that kind of wraps up what we had to present. I know we have a handful of questions that kind of came in, so thank you to everybody who asked questions. We had a few questions also that came in before the webinar, so we can bring those up and we can ask those. But I'll start here with what kind of came in during. I think we kind of hit on this, but maybe we just need to explain a little better. So this came from Eric Ansa. How does CDN pop or edge caching handle chunked content for VOD or live? Is it different? Do we treat it exactly the same?
Either one.
From our perspective on the server side, there's no difference between VOD or live. And we have a mechanism to actually take an entire full file and chunk it up into smaller pieces. So that gets distributed more evenly over the POP. So you're not just hitting one POP or one server all the time for the same content.
Yeah, and it goes back to the caching slides.
We also do hot filing. So if a VOD asset or a live stream is popular in a market, let's say it's a regional tennis match in Australia, which is a real life use case, and we see a hotbed of activity for that, we'll actually propagate that file or that stream either in individual pieces if we chunk it up or in totality across multiple servers within a POP. And back to the predictive point again, we may even say, you know what, it's popular here. In a few hours when the time zone catches up, or when that stream starts to show up because of blackout rules or time zones, we're gonna pre-cache it over here and predictively cache it. And that really helps with popular content as well, because then we can have 30, 40, 50 boxes working on it instead of 2 or 3, right? Without touching the customer's origin again,
right?
To the point about caching efficiencies.
Cool. All right, this question came from Timothy Lee. What do you guys think about peer-to-peer mesh streaming to offload bandwidth delivery? Are we doing that, or what are your thoughts of it in general?
Yeah, I think peer-to-peer has been around a long time, right? From all the virus days, from way too many sites. But it's definitely very relevant on the live side and on the VOD side, much more so on the VOD side. We're seeing small startups doing that. We're talking through partnerships with them and how that might relate to our network. But at the end of the day, they still need a CDN, right? There's a lot of these serverless CDN pitches that have come out. They're all reselling or providing services from folks like us, because they can't handle the entire event, or they can't handle the entire VOD library or the entire experience. And there's a lot of networks out there that are not big fans of P2P and actually prohibit that capability, right, from a WebRTC perspective. And that's a challenge that you have to work through. But it's a very interesting technology that we definitely spend quite a bit of time thinking about.
Great. Well, we're getting a lot here. So Anoop Nanda asked, I'll kind of take this one because I think it's a one-word answer here, but will Verizon's next OTT media product, is it going to leverage uplink encoding and or other technology platform capabilities in conjunction with Edgecast CDN delivery model? Answer is yes. We drink our own Kool-Aid, so it absolutely will.
Absolutely.
But we have no other comments on what that may be or when it is coming out. Jacqueline Loopy asked, are we supporting targeted advertising? We can talk about it from an uplink perspective, or we can talk about it just from a CDN perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes. So session management, one-to-one, individualized and contextualized advertising experiences are a massive part of our platform. That's what Uplink was built around. That's why we brought them in to connect them to all of our content provider customers, broadcast customers, OTT customers. And it's a huge source of our growth. It's probably one of the largest sources of our growth in terms of customers figuring out that they can do session management and give each individual consumer a completely different advertising experience that's more relevant and has bigger take rates and bigger click rates and higher CPMs and ultimately a better consumer experience. It's a huge part of the platform.
All right, cool. I will take about one more question and I think we'll wrap it up. So do we on the CDN support access control? And if so, how? Let David start with that one.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a couple of different ways that you can restrict access to your content from providers. Some of them are just built in natively to the CDN, like just being able to restrict based on geolocation or IP address. And then as you move into our security suite of products, there's more granular control, more sophisticated controls in how you restrict access to certain content and where users can view content or not.
Cool. So I think just in summary, and I want to ask you each one more question. I think it's important, especially when we're talking about being built for media, right? Any CDN, I always say this, people, any CDN can deliver video, but what the lengths we've gone to make sure that we are supporting high-end, high-quality chunks of video, being able to distribute those globally to the end user is really what differentiates, I believe, Edgecast CDN from the other CDNs when it comes to media specifically. Knowing that, what keeps you guys up at night, like in the future? What is the one thing that scares you, not about our network, but just media in general, being an IP delivered, moving into the future? What is that? Is it keeping up with the demand? Is it keeping up with new protocols? What?
Well, I'm probably more excited than scared about the revolution, right? I mean, we're in it, we're living it. 4K and super high def, and TVs are getting amazing now, and devices are getting amazing. Wireless networks are getting amazing, right? India's seeing a massive investment in their wireless networks, and that growth is taking off. So I think just we are in the hockey stick, right? Instead of for years people were talking about the hockey stick is coming, like we are in it right now. And that's a very exciting time that creates a lot of opportunities for innovation and new processes and systems and tools. And I think we thrive on that. It's an exciting fact.
Great.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yeah. I agree. I'm more excited than nervous.
That's a cop-out answer.
No, I know, but
you.
you're right. But I think if I had to name the one thing that scares me the most, it probably is this kind of the 4K, 8K. Just the size of those videos are becoming increasingly larger. Which, if you run a caching network, that takes up more and more of your available cache for other content. And so, how do you provide effective ways to cache that and then remove it if no one's accessing it?
Kyle just asked for more money to build new POPs.
Yeah, well, that's one way to get around it, but you can also be smarter and innovate around it as well, which is what I get excited about.
Yeah, great. All right, well, thanks to everybody who joined us today. We're super excited to have you on board. Please feel free to contact VDMS for a free trial at any time. You can email info@verizondigitalmedia.com. Someone will get back to you. We'll get you up and running. You can take us for a test spin. So Dave, Kyle, thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you next time.